Gustavo Fring's life-saving paranoia. How Gus knew about the car bomb. If you were to meet yourself from the past, would you get along? Or would they frustrate you due to their lack of finesse and experience? What kind of a relationship would form between two people who are so alike and yet are separated by an obvious difference in experience? Walter White and Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad are two sides of the same coin. They are both competent masterminds that would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Yet, these similarities create a rift between them, a gap that can never be bridged. Their relationship in the series is one of the most intriguing back and forths in recent cinema. Despite initially seeking Gus's cooperation, Walter eventually finds him to be a formidable opponent. The moment Gus establishes himself as a threat to Walt's entire family, Walt knew that he couldn't just be left alone. While it is true that Walt eventually triumphed over Gus through shrewd use of Hector Salamanca's deep-seated resentment found within their shared past, that wasn't the first time Walt had tried to kill Gus. Walt has made multiple failed attempts at Gus's life. Among the most notable ones is the car bomb that he so elaborately set up with multiple layers of deception and manipulation. It can be puzzling to think that Gus, without any obvious tell, could avoid it so smoothly. It is as if he could see the future. Did Gus just have plot armor? Was it just poor writing? How could he tell that getting into the car would be the death of him? In order to figure it out, we're going to take a look at Gus, Walter, and the dynamics they share as rivals and fellow criminals. Gustavo Fring is a mysterious man. Although we know next to nothing about his past, we do know a few things that help us understand what kind of person he is. Gus's careful demeanor is something he's cultivated throughout his entire life. Coming from extreme poverty, one can imagine how paranoia and sharp wit are essential even at a very young age. Even years before the events of either Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul take place, Gus has shown this display of intuition to great significance. Long before there was ever a sign that he was about to be confronted by Hank and the DEA about his past, the Chicken Man has wiped all his records clean, resulting in no available information about his life prior to his move to the United States. Although he attributed this to the dictatorial regime in the Chilean government and how they were notoriously unreliable about keeping records, this is likely to be untrue. Gus's experience in the criminal world is something that has shaped him into a highly intuitive and excessively careful individual. This is clearly shown in every facet of his life. His meticulously shaped public persona and how it and his criminal life work in tandem perfectly with one another shows how attentive Gus is both as an individual and as a criminal. He is a man who has spent his entire life pretending, planning, and adapting, all while keeping a low profile that blends exceptionally well into the mainstream law-abiding part of society. On the other hand, Walter White's background couldn't be more different. Unlike Gus, Walt did not grow up in extreme poverty. While not exactly overly privileged, Walt's education was ensured up until graduating from university. Walt shapes himself to be a prodigy, contributing significantly to a project that would eventually win a Nobel Prize. This also became the basis of Gray Matter Technologies, the business he founded and eventually left. This is the crux of Walter White's character. It is important to note that Walt left the business due to feelings of inferiority toward his wealthier, more financially stable business and romantic partner, Gretchen. After Gray Matter Technologies achieved massive financial success, it planted within Walt seeds of resentment and further inferiority over what he thought should have been rightfully his. His past experiences have shaped Walt to be a highly competent yet insecure individual with something to prove. This is reflected in his confrontation with Gus. When Walt finally has to deal with Gus, he didn't mind resorting to extreme measures because his life, along with his family's, was on the line. Although Gus had a lot to lose as well, for him it's been that way his entire life. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Walt, however, wasn't exactly used to feeling that way. We can understand this by noticing Walt's lack of experience, having to constantly watch his own back. Feeling pressured, Walt is desperate to get rid of Gus. Hence, he set up the elaborate plan of putting a bomb in Gus's car. Gus had no way of knowing what Walt had planned for him. However, he does have reason to be suspicious of the situation he was in. At the time, Jesse had just informed him that Brock was poisoned, thinking it was Gus that did it. However, Gus knew that he did no such thing. After taking in the information, it wasn't hard for Gus to narrow down the only person who had any incentive of poisoning Brock, Walter. It might seem unreasonable for Walter to randomly poison a child that his dear partner Jesse obviously cares about, but poisoning Brock allowed Walt to pin the blame on Gus, effectively turning Jesse against Gus instead. Gus, having understood the implication of Walt's actions, quickly concluded that an assassination attempt was on the horizon. Gus knew that after he threatened to kill Walt's family, he had backed Walt into a corner. Furthermore, he understood perfectly what Walt was capable of doing in that position. The last time Walt was in a similar position, he had successfully gotten rid of Gus's next best cook, Gail. Walt was perfectly capable of the most extreme measures if it meant he could achieve his goals, and he wasn't above poisoning children. That was all that Gus needed to know to avoid his car. Gus did not need to know about the bomb to listen to his intuition and not go in the car. With a strong foundation of the fact that Walt is out to get him, his years of experience and strong intuition kicked in, telling him that if he went about his day following his normal routine without any adjustments whatsoever, it would have been the perfect time for Walt to launch his attack. He wasn't necessarily avoiding his car specifically, he might have just wanted to throw off the trail, making sure his movements aren't too predictable now that he knows Walt had made his move. Here, it is important to note that a strong intuition is not equivalent to a mere gut feeling. Intuition is an innate ability one possesses that gives foresight into the situation at hand. A strong intuition is built upon a massive data set that enables one to conclude a plan of action based on unconscious calculations. Gus achieved this conclusion based on a strong basis of his suspicion. It just so happens that he did not need anything further than to let his paranoia take over and maneuver his way out of certain death. The car bomb exemplifies what is so fascinating about Gus and Walt's relationship. As criminal masterminds, they have a lot of the same skill set. However, the two are made decidedly different through a wide gap of experience. Gus's history has given him a wide breadth of experience to intuit from, while Walt's extreme though well thought out plan signifies his lack of it. Despite his eventual triumph over Gus, Heisenberg knew that he would never again find a rival as formidable as Gustavo Fring.